So in addition to the people in this room tonight, we're actually webcasting this presentation all around the world. It will be recorded and made available to our chapter presidents of MGSM AA. And for example, if you don't know who a chapter president is, we've got one here in the room tonight. Rebecca Murray, where are you? Stand up, please. This is Rebecca Murray from the Sydney chapter. And we've also got Ines Liu from our Beijing chapter here tonight as well. So there you go. Thanks for coming across. We really appreciate it. So just for this event. So the intent, of course, is that we want people all around the world to enjoy and experience these presentations, not just in Sydney. And this is the opportunity for people to come to their chapter presidents. We can hear from them, and they can arrange for their meetings in a time that maybe suits them best. So before we begin tonight, I'd like to do something which is very important. And if anyone in the room here is a rugby league fan, you'll know that you've got to get this bit right too. The NRL Grand Final of the weekend, we had something a little bit unfortunate, but I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. So I think we'll now go to Karen Ganshaw, who's our chairperson, and I'll just click away here. Just bear with me.
Great. Thank you very much. Those of you who've had me as a lecturer will know I hate lectures, but I need to do this for the microphone, I assume, so I'm going to move away because I normally roam that way and get my classes entirely dizzy. So thank you very much, everybody. I am the chair, I don't say person or man, chair of the MGSM Alumni Association. We are an independent association, alumni for alumni. And I guess what we're trying to do is bring together that, definitive MGSM experience and nurture and continue to invest in the big investment that we've all done with our education as part of the MGSM ecosystem. So the kind of things we really aspire to do is to get a strong, active alumni community, unapologetically helping one another get jobs, coaching, mentoring, helping unpack what the hell is that blockchain thing anyway, and absolutely clients and do business with one another, and then ultimately also have a shitload of fun. And we can all bag out what was your worst and best Rob Spillane moment. As John alluded to, although of course we've all been bound to either the CBD campus or the North Ryde campus, or actually Hong Kong campus, but the Hong Kong students here, and we do see ourselves, as the school does see itself, as a global phenomena. So yes, of course, we've got a huge gravitational pull to Sydney, and that does have its benefits. But we are very much wanting to allow and nurture our alumni to gather together in places like Beijing, so thanks Ines, in Zurich, in London, in Otago, and so that anyone who has that special I survived the MGSM syndicate group could get together and rebond and reconnect, and really nurtures that sort of ongoing memory. And I guess that's what it's really about. Like for all of us, MGSM was a very special experience. More good than bad, absolutely. One of the taglines was you learn more from the students than you do from lecturer, as much from the students as you do from lecturer. And that was one of the defining things of the robust debates we had in the syndicate groups and how that played out back into the classes and our robust debates of our lecturers. And I guess we want to continue that on and continue those robust debates and the constant learning so that the MGSM business community can be amazingly successful and, very importantly, help back to our Macquarie Business School and the next round of MGSM alumni. So we're looking to you all to be guest speakers, to potentially internships, and just basically helping the next group of interns cohort to come through and be the best they can be, so the MGSM as a brand will continue to be very, very high. And certainly one of the things we want to do as part of the association is hero up our alumni. So tonight is exactly about that. I will hand over to John to do the intro, but I'm so excited that our keynote speaker today is one of our alumni, also one of our lecturers, that's got an amazing story to tell. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Karen. Right. Oh, too far. Go back. There we go. So, I'd now like you to be welcomed. I'd like to welcome you all to Graham Millett. I think a few of you have met Graham. He's, as Karen alluded to, he's been a lecturer at MGSM, or now known as Macquarie Business School, for the last 20 years or so. I think you're actually finishing up this semester, is that right? That's right. So if you've had the opportunity to be lectured under Mr. Millett, that's a pretty exciting experience in itself. But Graham's got some really interesting, exciting stories to share with you tonight. And I'm sure a lot of you now know, he's the CEO of WSA Co, which is one of the biggest and most anticipated infrastructure projects in New South Wales history. WSA Co is the government-owned company building the Western Sydney Airport. This is a $5.3 billion project that will take the passenger experience in Australian aviation to an exciting new level. Having grown up in Western Sydney, he brings both local knowledge and more than 20 years' experience in senior executive roles at a number of national and global organisations. These organisations include Qantas and the National Broadband Network. As the CEO, Mr. Millett will lead the company as it undertakes the significant task of building Western Sydney Airport. The first flights, hopefully, will take off from the airport in 2026. Mr. Millett holds a Bachelor of Economics and a Master of Business Administration from Macquarie Business School, and is a non-executive director on the board of St George Community Housing. The MGSM Alumni Association is proud to have Graham present to our members and guests tonight. Please welcome Graham Millett to the stage.
Thanks so much. I see that technology hasn't changed in its effectiveness over the years. So thank you for coming in tonight to listen to my little story. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on which we meet tonight, and to acknowledge the elders and pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Very important that we do that at each meeting. So this is an interesting story. I'll tell you a little bit about the airport and my journey to it, but I want to tell you about the airport itself first. So before I do that, let me put it in context. And I'll put it in context by telling you a story, a true story. Hard to believe, but it's true. It goes back many decades to when British Airways were about to introduce a new type of passenger transport, an SST, supersonic transport, called the Concorde. And there had never been such a type of flight before. And they weren't too sure about the market and how they could reach that market. And so they employed a very, very expensive advertising agency, as you do. The advertising agency took the brief. The directors of the company said, we want to get across the themes of sophistication and speed and exclusivity, all those kinds of things. Excuse me. That's what we need to get across. Go away and come back with a campaign. So the advertising agency went away for a few weeks and came back. And this is before the days of social media, of course. And they came back with a campaign that had a combination of radio, cinema, television, and billboards, the old billboards. And they showed the directors of British Airways what the campaign involved. And here was a billboard, and it had a picture of the Concorde superimposed on a globe of the world. The Concorde was flying upwards to the right. And words around the top of the globe were lunch in London, dinner in New York. Now that was pretty special because up until that time you couldn't have lunch in London and dinner in New York on conventional transports. It just wasn't possible. The board looked at this and really liked it. They really liked it. So they said, okay, go forth and make it happen. So about 6 weeks later, all around Heathrow, these billboards popped up. And here was a picture of the Concorde flying up into the sky, superimposed on a globe of the world, with the words lunch in London, dinner in New York. But you know, there's always a budding advertising agent with a spray can. Always. So within 2 days, the billboard had changed ever so slightly. There was now a picture of the Concorde flying up into the sky, superimposed on a globe of the world. And the words, lunch in London, dinner in New York, baggage in Bangkok. Now, why is that relevant to an airport? Why is it relevant to an airport? It's relevant to an airport because no matter what you do in business, you've got to get the basics right. Modern technology, wonderful. Digitisation, wonderful, 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 wonderful. But you've got to get the basics right. British Airways learnt this several decades later when they opened Terminal 5 at Heathrow, and the passengers came in and went one way, and the bags came in and went another way. And there were about 1 million bags that never found their owners again. And that cost British Airways in reputation terms, it cost British Airways in terms of financial loss. So we've got to get the basics right. And I've got an interesting tension in my organisation, very interesting tension, because we don't open until 2026. I've got a group of people over here who are innovative and creative, and they want the best customer experience there can be, and biometrics and whiz through all this sort of technology now where you don't have to open your bag and show people what you've got and don't have to do any of that. This is a walk through with your bag and there you are. So curb to gate time is really, really, really fast. When you pull up in the aircraft, you're not sitting there waiting for somebody to run down and activate the aero bridge, because the aero bridge will know what sort of aircraft it is. It'll know where the door is and it'll be activated from the flight deck or in the cabin, and it will auto come across on command. Very different sort of experience. Very creative people, very innovative. All great. On the other side, I have a bunch of people who just want to build an airport. We know how to build an airport. Lots of airports have been built. It's a runway and it's a building and it's a few navigators. That's all you need to do. Build the airport. No. Wait a little while. Let's get the technology right. No. Build the airport. There's this creative tension between the two that you've got to be able to manage. And they're both right, but each thinks the other's wrong. So there's that sort of management issue. People say it must be a terribly, terribly hard project. And the answer is not really. Not really. So what's the most challenging part of your job, they say? The people. The people. That's what takes up most of my time. The people, not the project. Projects you can run through the simulations, through the computers, and do all that kind of stuff. And you can do programs and modify the programs on sensitivity analyses. You can do all that kind of good stuff. That's not hard. Managing contractors and letting big tenders, sure, but it's done all the time. You've just got to do it properly and follow process. The process is there. And that's fine. But as Rob Spillane will tell you, people, when they start using this, often don't veer into the process rational side of things. They're over here on the emotional side of things. My problem is I tend to be over here. Some of the people I deal with tend to be over here. And there's a real difficulty in me communicating with them and them communicating with me. And that's people inside the organisation and outside the organisation. But that's true in any organisation. So the airport itself is an extremely important project. I grew up in the western suburbs. And the western suburbs was where you lived when you couldn't afford to live anywhere else. And I remember when I first went to Sydney Uni, no one wanted to talk to me. No one wanted to talk to me because I came from the western suburbs. Yes, well, are you from Mossman? No, I'm not from Mossman. Oh, you must be from Vaucluse then. No, I'm not from Vaucluse. You're from the Shire? Because that's sort of, it's okay, it's acceptable. No, I'm from Parramatta. Where? Parramatta. Where? So this project is designed to be the catalyst, the spark that ignites the third city. So Sydney, we're going to end up with the Eastern Harbour City, which is where we are now, the Central River City, which is Parramatta, and the Western Parkland City, which is where this airport is going to be centred. And it's the catalyst, it's the spark that ignites all that development for the third city, for the aerotropolis. And to expand the region from a catchment area of about 2.3 million people at the moment to a catchment area of about 3.5 million people in a very short period of time. But we've got to have the jobs. We've got to have the jobs. Because as you'll see in a moment, it's all rural and semi-rural. I mean, 12 months ago, before the Prime Minister turned the sod, not for the first time, by the way, the sod's been turned twice before. It has. It's been turned twice before. And each time, that's all that happened. There were big announcements and what have you, but nothing happened. In fact, I did a bit of research. In this airport, an airport at Badgerys Creek was first mentioned in Parliament 72 years ago. 72 years ago. By some Australian standards, that's pretty quick. 72 years ago. So the project is exceptionally important in raising the socio-economic profile of the region. That's what it's designed to do. It's also designed to relieve Sydney's very much stretched airspace capacity. The Sydney Airport last year handled about 44 million passengers. It can grow a bit to probably about 60 million passengers, but it can't do much more than that. So all the peak periods are now full, the shoulder periods are starting to fill up, and the off-peak, no one wants to travel in those. It's a curfewed airport. Can't travel between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m, and it's got movement caps. You probably hear about 80 an hour. That's not quite right. It's 20 per quarter round non-cumulative. So it's capped. Our airport is not capped, and it doesn't have a curfew. So it operates 24/7, which for some people is great, and for other people is very scary, because they imagine that aircraft are going to fly overhead and make lots of noise. And there will be aircraft noise, there's no doubt about that. One of my jobs is to minimise the downside of the airport, as there's a downside with every infrastructure project, and to maximise the upside. That's my job. So people say, oh, please tell us there'll be no noise. And so I can't say that. I was in the Blue Mountains last, when was it, February, March, giving a talk, and a woman came up to me after the talk and she jabbed her finger in my chest. She said, "You sir are an environmental vandal." Now, I've been called many things. That was new. And I said, "Ma'am, why am I an environmental vandal?" And she said, "Because you're going to fly your planes over my house and drop fuel on my house." I said, "Ma'am, I fly. I'm a pilot. And one thing keeps me in the air, and that's my plane. And one thing keeps my plane in the air, and that's the fuel. So the last thing I'd want to do would be to drop fuel. But ma'am, what's your address?" True story. True story. Revenge can be sweet. So I've just touched it, I've just clicked it, and guess what? It doesn't work. There we go. Oops, it's worked twice. So there's a delay on these things. There we go. So an airport for Western Sydney. 1 in 10 people live in Western Sydney. So 25 million people in Australia, 2.45 live in Western Sydney. It's the third largest economy in the country after Sydney and Melbourne, as you can see there. 45% of our population was born overseas. We have 120 ethnicities, and about 140 languages/dialects, extraordinary, which has is a big opportunity for us in terms of what we call VFR traffic, so visiting friends and relatives. One of the really interesting things about the region is that almost half, every working day, travel out of the west into the east. So they travel about an hour to an hour and a half in the morning, and about an hour and a half in the afternoon, 5 days a week. Add that up, and you get somewhere between 10 and 15 hours of productivity lost. People away from their homes, could be doing other things, could be exercising, whatever the case may be. So what we want is the 30-minute city, people who live and work within 30 minutes, which is best practice. Smaller cities in Australia, they've always had international airports. There's Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide, and Canberra. Even Canberra has what is called an international airport. I think it has 2 international flights a week, but it's an international airport. Might have 1 now, actually. But I think it just hangs on to the title of international. Whoops. Nothing changes. There we go. There. Airport fast facts. So, federal government-owned body, we're a government business enterprise, as you can see here. When we open, we will have a full service. So we'll have low-cost carriers, we'll have full-service carriers, so AirAsia X, Tony Fernandez's group, the Jetsstars of this world, the Tigers of this world, the Qantas's of this world, the Virgins of this world, the Singapore Airlines of this world, the Emirates of this world. They are in the process of signing up, or have signed up already, to fly into and out of the airport. In fact, Alan Joyce, the CEO of Qantas, said to us about a month ago, he said, "I want my A380, named Nancy Bird Walton, to be the first aircraft into and out of that airport. I want it to be the signature aircraft." And I said, "Well, in the signature airport, Alan." And he said, of course. We're having a single terminal. It's been a really exciting week because Last week, Monday and Tuesday, I sat on a 5-person panel, 3 of them eminent Australian architects, myself, who is not an eminent Australian architect, and my chairman for WSACO. And we sat for 2 days and deliberated over 3 shortlisted designs for the terminal building. We'd started with about 44, we knocked it back to 15, come down to 5, come down to 3, and we had to decide which one. And we're going to be presenting that to the Prime Minister and Cabinet in about 2 weeks' time. 2 weeks' time, and then we'll do a big public announcement. What I can promise you is it is pretty spectacular. It is pretty spectacular. Not like the new Beijing terminal, which is a starfish pattern, which I think will age not terribly well. It's an airport that I think will be timeless, and it was a criterion that we set for the designers. It has to be timeless. And the reason it has to be timeless is this airport doesn't get built and that's it. We open with what we call a 10 map airport, 10 million passengers per annum. Then we go to 15, about 12 years later. 12 years after that, we go to 37 million. And 12 years after that, roughly 2060, 2065, we go to 82 million passengers. That's the size of JFK. That's the size of Dubai. This is a big airport. Don't forget, Sydney last year did 44 million. So it's a big airport by anybody's measure. Lots of freight. It'll be the air freight hub of Sydney, because Sydney Airport is moving out of air freight, dedicated air freight anyway, because there's more money in passenger aircraft. We open with a 3.7 kilometre runway, which will handle any sort of aircraft. So the new aircraft that Boeing and Airbus are putting up are called ULRs, ultra long range aircraft. So they'll do Sydney, New York in single hop, about 21 hours. They'll do Sydney, London in a single hop, and Melbourne, New York, and Melbourne, London. So they have what's called high MTOW, high maximum takeoff weights. So they need a long runway. 3.7 kilometres is all you need. It will accommodate any of those aircraft. A380s, easy. 777Xs, easy. Any of these aircraft. 787-10s, easy. The size of the airport is interesting. Sydney Airport is about 900 hectares. This is about twice the size. Not quite, about 1,780 hectares. So it is a heck of a big airport. Let's see if that works. Nope. Let's try it again. There we go. Oops. Fond memories. There we go. Sorry? That's all right. So what you have here is what's called an airport site layout, an ASL. And all you can see here is stage 1. Stage 1 is the 10 map building. Along the top, what you notice is that there's that horizontal line. That's the runway. At either end, there are 2 what we call RETs, RETs, rapid exit taxiways. So the aircraft doesn't have to slow very much to get off. So you get aircraft on and off the runways very, very quickly. We have here over to the left-hand side in green what will be MRO, hangars. We have down here freight. We have here the terminal building. This little blue area in the middle, that's the start of the terminal, what we're building. This is Business Park. There's a new train line coming in. There's a station at the Business Park. There's a station at the terminal. We have catering. We have corporate jets. We have bridge stands. We have unbridged stands for the low-cost carriers. We have, at the moment, a thing called GBAS, which is ground-based augmented systems. We actually won't do that. We'll do a thing called SBAS, which is satellite-based augmented systems. What does that mean? It's an instrument landing system that uses satellites, whereby the satellites talk to the aircraft and the aircraft talks to the ground and the ground talks to the satellites. And what it enables you to do is to land the aircraft, no matter what sort of aircraft it is, which flight path it comes in, it will land that aircraft within 10 centimetres left or right, within 10 centimetres forward and back, every time. Every time. Every time. It doesn't matter what the weather is. It doesn't matter because this is also what we call a Cat 3B runway. Cat 3B runway means that you can land in pretty much any condition at all. Great boon for pilots. Tremendous boon for pilots. There is only one other Cat 3B runway in Australia, and that's Melbourne. That's Melbourne. You'll notice the bottom half of the site is undeveloped. There's nothing down here. This actually sits undeveloped until around about late 2040s, maybe 2050. And then what you'll see is there's another runway, a second parallel runway, 3.7 kilometres again, and this building expands. The blue expands here, 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 and here. And that's when you go to 82 map, 82 million annual passengers. It's a pretty big airport. Dubai, yes. JFK, yes, same size. So connectivity. One of the fascinating things about this project, and one of the things that worried me when I came into it was the fact that there was a state government component, because federal governments and state governments sometimes don't quite gel. There was a third confounding factor here, which was the municipal councils. There were 8 of them, and they'd done this cities deal, and I thought, this is going to be a whole lot of fun. Federal governments, state governments, local governments, and us would be the meat in the sandwich. And it hasn't happened. They've all got along really well and are productive. They actually work really well together. It makes my job so much easier. We're getting rail on day one. There's a new north-south link which goes from St Mary's down to the airport down to the Aerotropolis. Stage 2 is from the Aerotropolis down to Campbelltown. Stage 3 is the link from the west to the east into Parramatta or into Westmead, and that will connect with the new metro that's going from Parramatta to the city. So we will have a reasonably fast link, but over time. There's a new M12 being built, a new motorway without toll. There'll be a rapid bus service. We're working on that pretty hard at the moment. There's currently big roadworks going on Northern Road. RMS are doing that. They're doing a good job, I have to say. So the connectivity is really important. We know when we've looked at second airports overseas that a critical success factor is access and egress, an absolute critical success factor. So we're working very hard with the state government and with local councils to make it work. We will probably be the first airport that will have, for example, autonomous trams, but battery powered. So there won't be overhead lines and there won't be rails. So it's a combination of a sort of tram and a bus. That's being trialled at the moment. So we'll have something like that. We'll have autonomous vehicles coming and going to the airport. We'll have our own autonomous vehicles. We will have no vehicles airside that will be diesel operated. So sustainability is a huge part of our story, We originally had a remit to go to 4.5 stars. By 2026, 4.5 stars will probably be the equivalent of 2 stars today. So we actually have to build to something like 6 stars, and we've got to work out how we do that. So we've got a big study that's going on at the moment, looking at what we have to do to get to 6 stars, to make this airport the most sustainable airport in the Southern Hemisphere. So not just in Australia, but in the Southern Hemisphere. See how we go this time. No? Want to hit it? There we go. Workforce targets. Now, we originally thought that we were going to have lots of trouble with the workforce targets. When I sat down with the Minister and said, we've got these workforce targets, here they are. He said, well, they're very nice, but he said they're about half of what they need to be. So I was quivering a little bit. What we ended up with was a minimum of 30% of the workers have to be from Western Sydney. We're sitting much higher than that, much higher. We said that we had to have, and when the airport opens, it has to be 50%. We think it'll be much higher than that. We said that 20% of our people have to be learning workers, have to be engaged in some sort of accredited learning. So far, we're well in advance of that too. And we also had a target around diversity, and which comprised Indigenous folks and comprised women in non-traditional roles. And we're well in excess of that target as well. We thought we were going to have difficulties, but we haven't, interestingly, and I'm very thankful that that's the case. We might have a slide on that, actually. Where are we? There we go. There it is. So there's a target of 20% learning. That's at 34%. Diversity was 10%. We're at 32%. Local employment, 30%. Prior to opening, we're at 54%. So very pleasing. This is the site, but it's only 6% of the site that you can see here. 12 months ago, this was greenfields. 12 months ago, this was that. So you can see the enormous amount of work that's been done in a short period of time. This is a new bridge, and you can't, to give you an idea of the scale, the width across there is the same as the platform of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It's 49 metres across, 49 metres. People say, you're not going to need 49 metres when you open, and they're right, we're not. But we never have to go back and touch it. We can go to 82 map with future-proofed it. And one of the big challenges we have with this airport is future-proofing it. Because while we open in 2026, while the final stage is about 2065, in fact, it'll be around for a couple of 100 years. Unless aviation changes very substantially, it'll be around for a couple of 100 years. And we have to design it also for aircraft that are much different to today. So we've got to design it to accommodate drones, as an example, but we also have to design it so it can accommodate SSTs, because we will probably see the return of SSTs at some stage, which are much more environmentally friendly, much easier to fly, but they have different takeoff characteristics. So we've got to design for that as well. So we've got to take into account so much we think is going to happen in the future and build it in so that our successes don't have abortive work. Supersonic transport. Yeah, Concorde. The Concorde won't come back, but something else will. that will have that sort of speed. In fact, it might sound like science fiction to you, but there's a type of aircraft called a scramjet. And the scramjet will get you from here to London in about 2.25 hours. So traditional aircraft takes off, levels off, flies on time, goes down. Scramjet goes up and down. That's it. So it goes up to the edge of space and then down again. So 2.25 hours. There is no cruise. There's no cruise. What an interesting experience that will be. Airline support. So here's Alan on the left. Behind him is my chairman, and behind him is Gareth Evans, who's the CEO of Jetstar. And we're signing an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. We signed one with Alan. We signed one with Paul at Virgin. We've signed one with, don't tell anyone this, and you on the camera, don't tell anyone. We've signed one with Air New Zealand. We've signed 11 with freight operators, and we've got more out there at the moment with carriers. So it's looking pretty good in terms of airlines that want to come to us. Why would they want to come with us? The answer is because they won't be able to fly in Sydney. It's full. Sorry, it's full. And that's the fact now. Airlines telling us that they cannot get peak hour slots into Sydney. They're out of Sydney. Here's the freight side. So here are the various operators of freight who are very nervous about Sydney Airport, because Sydney Airport is not extending leases at the moment. So they've only got short-term tenure on their facilities there. The next slide, agriculture. The state government is putting in place an agribusiness precinct around the airport, around the northern part of the airport. So at the moment, if you want to get fresh produce out of Sydney into Southeast Asia in time for the markets in the morning there, you can't. Sorry, but you can't, because of curfew. You can't do it. You can do it out of Brisbane, you can do it out of Melbourne, but you can do it out of Perth, but you can't do it out of Sydney. So we lose all that GDP. With a 24/7 airport, you can. And so one of my relatives who runs a fresh seafood business has said, if he can do that, get his fresh produce out of Sydney, 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at morning, he can get it into Southeast Asian markets, and it will triple his revenue and quadruple his profit. He's pretty happy. So where are we? We're 2 years old, just on 2 years old. We started in a service office just up the road. Two of us started there. Weren't really quite sure what we should do. Had some ideas, bounced around a lot and made a few mistakes. But overall, we're right on time and we're right on budget. And the risk profile is below where we want it to be, which is good, below where we want it to be. So we've got a risk appetite statement and we're well within that. So where are we at the moment? So you can see that 2019, we've just announced the bulk earthworks contract. This is to move the equivalent of about 25 million cubic metres of earth. Makes it the 6th largest earth moving project in Australia's history. 6th largest. So we've got to do an amazing amount of earth moving in a short period of time. And that's just for stage 1. If you look at stage 2 is moving something like another 18 million cubic metres of earth. It's okay, good question. It's cut and fill. What do we do with all this earth? So the site undulates quite a bit, and the distance between the highest point and the lowest point is a 12-storey building. It's 41 metres. 41 metres. So what are we doing? We're chopping the top off the hills and dropping it into the valleys. What do we get? A graded area. So we're very fortunate. That's luck. Really, that's luck. We didn't plan that. God planned that. And she did a great job. There are some other things I won't do that. So 2020, the design will start at the end of this year. We'll be underway with the design. We'll announce the architects the Prime Minister will announce the architects in about 3 weeks. 2021, we keep digging dirt. 2022, we actually start building the terminal, which is really exciting. The earthworks continue. We have to then lay down the pavements, the runway, the taxiways, the aprons. 2024 comes, we're still doing that. We're doing some what we call landside civils, the roads, the business park, etc. 2025 comes, and the bulk earthworks, the terminal, and the landside construction work really comes to an end around about Q3 of 2025. So you might think, okay, it's all done. And the truth is, it pretty much is, except for testing and commissioning. We have to spend about 15 months testing and commissioning. 15 months. It's a process called ORAT, Operational Readiness and Airport Transfer. Why is that important? Well, because lives depend on it. Lives depend on it. And it's all the more important because of the degree of automation that we'll have in the airport. So when you look at this airport in 2026, you might notice that there isn't a control tower. There won't be a control tower. There won't be people sitting up on this very tall building guiding planes in and out. It won't be there. What it will be is a camera on a stick. Well, I call it a camera on a stick. It's a project that will eventually find its way into all airports. And what it means is you don't have control. Human beings don't have control at that airport. They might be sitting somewhere else. They might be controlling out the airport from Melbourne or from Wagga or from Brisbane or wherever the case may be because of these high resolution cameras and because of SBAS, satellite-based augmented systems. The next slide shows the Commonwealth and WSA engagement. So the Commonwealth is our shareholder. The Department of Finance and Department of Infrastructure are our two shareholder departments. We do the planning, we do the design, we do the construction, we do the procurement. We've just opened our experience centre. Come out and see us and have an experience. Commercial development, this is the business park, of course, as well as the aero side of business. And then we're charged with operating the airport. Canberra is a regulatory oversight authority. It designs the airspace, not us. They design the airspace. Noise amelioration, they're responsible for. Biodiversity, they're responsible for. And they chat to the councils and they chat to state government as well to make sure that the connectivity is there. We do also, but you can see that there is this overlapping area here that we're constantly sort of finding the boundaries of. No surprise, because it moves around. It's quite fluid. Community engagement. This is huge for us. It's absolutely huge. We're actually very lucky because the project is bipartisan. Anthony Albanese, the leader of the opposition, supports it. Labor Party generally support it. Liberal Party support it under Scott Morrison. They support it. So we have bipartisan support. The organisation I was in previous to this, the National Broadband Network, did not have bipartisan support. Very difficult to manage unless you actually got it. But of course, a big component of our stakeholders rather, are the people who live around the airport. Now, there's not a lot at the moment. They tend to be further out, but they worry about noise. So we've got all these sorts of programs we run. We're in a schools program. We've got a curriculum around aviation for kids from really low primary school right up into senior school. We do letterbox drops because lots of the population is quite old and still like a letter. Some of the people who work for me have never seen a letter, by the way. They have no idea. They really have no idea what it is. And they say, "What's that coloured thing up in the corner?" I said, "That's a stamp." I said, "What?" "It's a stamp." "Oh, we've read about those." Lots of early engagement for the contractors, talking to them, finding out what they want in a contract, what we want in a contract, etc. Aboriginal engagement meetings, really important, very difficult group of people to deal with because they're quite a fragmented community. Council forums, helplines, door knocks, etc., etc., etc. It's all a really important part of what we do to ensure that our neighbours are kept informed and we take their views on board with everything that we plan. Community engagement there, you can see the sorts of things that I just talked about. But if you want to come out, we will open. We'll talk about this today. We will open on Saturday soon. At the moment, it's a Monday to Thursday type job with large groups on a Friday. We're closed on the weekend, which is really when we should be open. So we're just about to do that. Canberra's been very kind to us in that regard. It's a great facility. What else we've got? Next slide is more community engagement. So this is how important it is. I've got a local update in the local papers. I go out and I talk to Rotary groups, Probus groups. I visit the councils. You heard about Blue Mountains Council the other night. I think I went and saw them. We were up there for a couple of hours talking to them about the airport. It's a really interesting, vibrant sort of project that people are fascinated by. So aviation fascinates people. Construction fascinates people. Something new that is transformative for the region fascinates people. And it's a real privilege to be a part of it, to be frank with you, a real privilege indeed. But it is exceptionally tiring, I have to tell you. Like most fascinating things, it's very wearing. For everybody, I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about people on the team. I have people who are still there at 10 o'clock at night. I've had people there till 2:30 a.m. working on business cases and what have you. And that's unsustainable. It's simply unsustainable. People keel over. It's not anybody's interest, the project's interest or their interest for that to occur. So we've got a rule now that the lights go out at 7 p.m. Lights go out at 7 p.m. The trouble is somebody's found the switch box. Go on again at about 10 past 7, which is irritating. We'll have to see how we can work that. But apart from that, the project, touch wood, is proceeding according to plan. It will flex a bit as the years go by because the technology will change. A whole raft of things other things will change. What people expect of the airport will change. We're designing it as a destination, not just as an airport. So Changi, those of you who've been through Changi, wonderful airport, it's a destination. What do I mean by that? Well, school kids come there to do their homework. School kids come to do their homework. People go there, not to travel anywhere, but to experience Changi Airport. And that's what we want. We want the airport as an experience. We want to differentiate it from Sydney Airport. Sure, we have a catchment area, but what we'd love to do is take some of their customers away from them. What they're going to have difficulty getting any of ours because they haven't got the slots to get into and out of the airport. Having said that, we will certainly collaborate with Sydney Airport to ensure that the state benefits. We won't collude. We'll compete and we will cooperate, but we won't collude. They're a privately held organisation. They have their own business objectives, and we respect that. We have our own objectives. They respect that, and we've been able to work together really harmoniously today, which I'm pleased about. I think the temperature will rise a bit over the next few years as we get closer to fruition. That's bound to happen, and that's not a bad thing. And that's where we'll end up. Sydney with two major airports. We will be the major airport, though, simply because we're big and we've got more land. Our biggest asset is the land that we have. Interesting to note that Australia, I'm told, I haven't checked this figure, so you can check yourself, Australia has about 17 billionaires. That's 17 billionaires. 9 of them own land around the airport. Think about that for a little while. So that's really all I've got to say, John, but I'm happy to take questions if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, Graham. That was fantastic. I've got to say, I had a feeling it was going to be something like the experience of going to Melbourne Avalon Airport. And I don't know if any of you have been to Melbourne Avalon, where it just feels like a few, 40-foot containers, and you got to usher off the cow before the plane lands. I must admit I was quite naive, but this has been a real eye-opener for me tonight. And thanks again. Fascinating stuff. Thank you.
Avalon Airport is the most attractive tin shed I've ever been in.
Yeah, no, that's 80 million passengers.
And don't tell Lindsay Fox that, please.
We're hearing about drones and supersonic transport and all sorts of interesting things there. But before we jump into Q&A, I've actually got a question from a really good mate of mine who lives in the Blue Mountains, and I'm sure you get this question asked a lot. What about flight paths? Are we going to have noise issues? Do we have to be wearing special helmets? And to take us through that.
Well, you can wear all the special helmets you like, but you don't need to. A couple of things need to bear in mind. First of all, we don't do flight paths. So Canberra does the flight paths. But what I can say to you is, from my airline days, flight paths are a very complex animal. They're a hugely complex animal. Why? Well, firstly, there are 5 variables. There's safety, there's capacity, there's efficiency, there's noise, and there's environmental criteria to have to meet. So there's 5 criteria to have to meet. 5. But then, to design the airspace around Western Sydney International, you have to take into account the airspace around Kingston Smith, the airspace around Bankstown, the airspace around Camden, the airspace around Holsworthy, and the military airspace around Holsworthy and also around Richmond. So you've got 5 sets of airspace already in existence, 2 of them military. Holsworthy's got rotary aircraft. And then you've got the 5 criteria that I mentioned. So multiply all that, and you have to do tens of thousands of simulations, because simulations are not just this way, but they're that way. They're horizontal and they're vertical. So now you've got another couple of dimensions to work in as well. So they're incredibly complex. So you've got to take all that into account in the design of them. You also have to take into account the sort of aircraft that you're going to have, the weights, the wingspans, to get the separations right, vertical and horizontal. But the other interesting thing about aircraft is every new generation of aircraft, which is about every 10 years, is about 7% quieter than the generation before it. Compounding that and making it better is the fact that 4-engined aircraft are about to go to heaven. You won't see A380s in about 6 or 7 years' time. They will have gone because they're 4 engines. And the tri-jets will go as well, the freighters. Why? Because twin-engine jets now are much cheaper. They're cheaper to buy, they're cheaper to run, and they're quieter, much more efficient aircraft overall. So you're going to see twins, not tris and not quads. You're also going to see quieter engines because they're a much newer design, and you'll see smarter airspace design as well. So taking off now, some of the tricks they use are to climb, stop, climb, stop, climb. When I say stop, of course, I mean stop at that altitude, not stop. Climb, stop, climb, stop, climb, stop. But you can do a linear takeoff now, and you can do what are called hot landings. So you can come in high and fast because the SBAT system allows you to do that, if you want to. I mean, it's up to the airline and operating procedures. So will there be more noise? Yes, because out at the moment all you can hear are the crickets. And the bulldozers, of course. The crickets and the bulldozers. So there will be more noise, but our job, as I said earlier, is to minimise all the adverse effects of major infrastructure and maximise the benefits.
Very good. Before I dive into Q&A with the audience, I'll just ask if you could ask the question in a reasonably concise manner. And Graham, do you mind just relaying the question before you answer it so we can hear that through the online community?
Yeah, and did you want it answered in a concise manner?
It's up to you. You've got the microphone.
All right, who's got a question?
Yeah, over here.
Graham, congratulations.
Yeah.
Regarding the
Yeah.
the growth.
Yeah. I think that you've got to take into account the growth in the number of people travelling as well. So last year...
Sorry, if you could just relay the question.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. So the question is around sustainability and are we taking into account the fact that some people will choose not to fly because they have environmental concerns? Did I paraphrase that accurately? Okay. So last year, worldwide, about 4 billion people travelled by air. About 4 billion people. Within 20 years, 8 billion people will travel by air. And that's a big concern for the industry, airports and airlines. But of the 4 billion increment, about 2.8 billion are in Southeast Asia. In other words, us. So while some people will choose not to fly, a lot more will choose to fly. And the difficulty we're having is how we're going to manage, even with 2 airports, over a period of time, come about 2080, 2085, 2090, somewhere in there, we're at capacity with 2 runways and 24/7 operation, and Sydney's well and truly at capacity by then. And then the government of the day will be looking for a 3rd airport somewhere. How do you decide on a 3rd airport when it took 72 years to get to this one? So 72 years back from about 2090 is about now. I hope that answers the question.
Up the front there.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
We know that Western Sydney.
Yeah.
We talked about the activities.
Yeah.
Given all of that,
Yeah.
what's your vision?
Wet.
So just to relay the question.
So the question is around water in Western Sydney. Western Sydney is a very dry part of the eastern seaboard, and so what's the vision we have for water? Okay, so one of the biggest risks that we face with the airport is what we call the interfaces. So it's the roads being there on time, the rail being there on time, telecommunications being there on time, and water and sanitation being there on time. So your new CEO and his chairman is coming to our board meeting month after next, and we're talking to them about this very issue because provision of water and sanitation is a real worry. So what are we doing? I talked about sustainability with us. There's a couple of solutions. One is that we be incredibly efficient with our water use. So catchments and all this sort of thing, and reuse. I think there'll also be the issue, and I don't think many people in Sydney realise that we already have a degree of recycling in the system. Now that's done very quietly because if you're in London, and many of you will have been to London, you drink the water, it's already been through 4 people's kidneys. No? The next time you turn the tap on and get a glass of water, it's been through 4 people's kidneys. So what? It's perfectly good drinking water. Now, we have started that in Sydney. We haven't publicised that. but we've started it. I've let the cat out of the bag. Don't tell anyone, okay? But there will be much more of that. So water will be reprocessed. It's probably our most precious resource. We're very conscious of how we handle it. So we're looking at ways to absolutely minimise our usage, and then how to maximise our reusage of it with Sydney Water. So grey water, we're already using grey water at our new experience centre. We've got our own sewage treatment works because you folks aren't ready to do that for us yet. So we've got our own. We reuse that. We're very, very conscious of the water situation and the higher temperatures. So we're trying to build water. The whole Western City is trying to build water in as much as they can, minimise heat sinks like concrete, which raise the temperature again. All those things being considered. State government committee that's looking at all of that as we speak.
A question over here on the left.
Yes, sir.
Is there any improvement on barcode? You're talking about baggage technology.
Yep.
Barcode's been around for a million years, and everyone uses it.
Yeah.
There used to be talk about RFID and other stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is there any improvement there?
Yeah, so barcodes have actually been around for about 3 million years, not one. And from the airline industry, I can tell you the bags are much more of a pain than passengers are. You can always find a passenger, whether they're drunk or whether they're sober, you can always find them. Whether they're asleep or whether they're awake, you can always find them. Bag can't tell you where it is. But with an RFID tag, either passive or active, it can. So our bag tags will be both barcoded, because the only time you can not have barcodes is when every single airport in the world goes to RFID. And I mean every single airport in the world. And there are several thousand airports, because some are quite small, several thousand. So we will have RFID built in to the barcode. And what this means, and we were talking about this just the other day with Department of Home Affairs, what this means is that we will sell you an app for your phone for $2 or something, whatever it might be. And when you get off the plane, the phone will tell you that your bag is still on the aircraft. And 2 minutes later, it will tell you your bag is on the tray system. And 3 minutes later, it will tell you your bag's about to pop out in 2 minutes over there. Or it will tell you your bag is still back where you came from.
Thank you. And we've got a question over on the right.
Yes, sir.
So just in terms of pushing around,
Yeah.
Sydney Airport has
Yep.
got one and
About 2050.
the challenge is, well, what happens
So when you say a plane that's come down, you mean there's been an air smash on the runway?
all around?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a real problem for us. So what we're doing is we're designing one of the parallel taxiways as an emergency runway. So it can take traffic in an emergency. What we will try to do is divert traffic as much as we can, but where we can't for fuel reasons or whatever, or wind conditions at Sydney Airport don't suit. Because when, as you know, when wind conditions in Sydney are bad, you've only got one runway operating, east-west, the 2-5 runway operating. So we will have one of the parallel taxiways capable in the short term of landing and takeoffs for aircraft. So that's what we will do with a single runway when there's a problem.
All right, question over here on the right.
Graham, next to your talk, I'm Travis McCann. I work for the other airport in Sydney.
Which other one's that? Oh, you're from Camden. Okay.
The other eastern.
Oh, Bankstown.
Getting closer. You alluded to challenges with the community in relation to new airport.
Yes.
Noise or emissions or things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
What's WSAK doing in relation to ameliorating those concerns within the community, those with use of planning or in conjunction with the city bureau and Aeropolis?
So what are we doing essentially around flight paths? Is that really the question?
Well,
And dealing with the community? Yeah. Well, the real community issue at the moment is around flight paths and noise. That's the real community issue. The community issue that will gather a bit of pace over time will be traffic congestion until the roads are widened and the new M12's in. But that's a little way down the track, probably 2 years down the track. So what do we do with the community? Well, frankly, we're up front with them. So we go out and meet them. Right? We don't sort of hide away, and they are convinced that I have in my computer the flight paths. They're absolutely convinced about that. Some people. So there's little I can do to convince them otherwise. But what I do say to them is that we're going to minimise it as much as we can. Brisbane Airport's a good example of how they handled the community with the new runway that's opening next year, and they were very upfront. And that's what we do. We're upfront when we say there will be more noise. So how do we make it as the best possible experience? So Sydney Airport, I think the nearest house is about 500, 600 metres to the runway, something like that. I mean, that should never have been allowed, but of course, the airport just grew over time. The houses were there and it just grew over time. In fact, it wasn't even Sydney's designated airport for a long period of time. The Rose Bay flying boat area was the designated airport. So it sort of grew over time. So we are working with Department of Planning, New South Wales Department of Planning, to say, for God's sake, don't put houses close to the runway. And my very phrase to them is, don't repeat the mistakes that were made at Sydney Airport. And that's not a mistake Sydney Airport made, it was a planning mistake to some extent, where houses and densities were allowed to build close to the airport. Now, if you're going to be close to an airport, you're going to get noise. I mean, that's just a harsh reality of it, I'm sorry. Even electric aircraft, when they eventually come in for short haul, they make a noise. They do make a noise. Less than a jet, of course, but they still make a noise. And that rightly irritates people. You know, I live off the approach path to the third runway in Sydney, and for the first 4 months that operated, you know, I was ready to come over and help you people. I really was. After 4 months, don't notice it. Just don't notice it. It's just so you do to an extent become acclimatised to it. You do not totally, but it becomes less relevant, and you build it in to your normal ways of thinking. So you don't think, I haven't heard that before. The mind sort of says, oh, I understand what that is.
Okay, we have another flight path question over here. No, just joking.
So that's an interesting question.
Just a later question.
Yeah. So what's the break-even point effectively for the airport? So at Senate estimates, we were asked this question, and the business case really says that you break even probably around about 2040, somewhere in there. And people say, really? Wouldn't take that on. Not interested. 2040. Well, guess what? Do you know how many calls I get from investment banks on a weekly basis? Do you know how many I've met? Do you know how many say, and pension funds that say, we've got to lose, last one I heard was, we've got to lose $20 billion. This was an international investment bank. You guys interested? And then I explained to them that we're just building it. And they say, oh, when will it be open? And they say, oh, we'll come back then. So the private sector, the reason we're building it is because the private sector didn't want it. They didn't want to because of the risks associated with it, which are huge. The risks are huge. And when do we start earning revenue? Well, when we open, which is 7 years' time. So you're going to invest your money and not get anything back for 7 years. I don't think so. Governments can do that. That's the role of government to some extent, to build this infrastructure ahead of when it's needed. So that it's there. We need to learn the lesson. We've learned it from roads that we keep chasing our tail on these things. No? When do we build a new road? When it's too late. It doesn't matter what state you're in. It doesn't matter whether it's Canberra or it doesn't matter. When do we build a new road? When it's too late. When it's really crowded and it's at a standstill, then we think, oh, I might build a new road. And it's the same with airports. What? People don't want roads. You saw what happened with the WestConnex. People don't want airports. People don't want nuclear power plants. All understand the reasons. But the problem is you've got to build the infrastructure for future generations. As I say, this airport is not so much for us sitting here. Right? Probably by 2050, most of us, 2060, will be pushing up daisies. So it's for your kids and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. And beyond that, this is a generational thing that we're building. And that takes deep pockets that don't expect an immediate return. Otherwise, nothing gets built. Or otherwise, you start charging ridiculous fees up front, so you get a very, very fast return. But then people decide they'll do something else.
Right, we've got time for, I think, one more question. I think you were next. Yep.
Yep. Fuel pipeline. Yep. So do I know if there's any fuel pipeline that will feed the airport when we open? I don't know. The issue is that the corridor for the fuel pipeline is really a state government responsibility. Building the pipeline is probably a private sector responsibility. And if you look at the fuel study that was done, The economics sort of tip in favour of a fuel pipeline when the demand is about 3 million litres a day. We hit about 3 million litres a day in 2034, 2035 on the forecasts. So our plan at the moment is to truck fuel in. Now you might think, horror, 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 but fuel is already trucked into Gold Coast Airport. Fuel is already trucked into Adelaide Airport. Fuel is already trucked into Canberra Airport. Trucking fuel is no big deal. And it doesn't result in many trucks, actually. So when we open, if we had to truck it, it's about 8-9 trucks a day. And if you've ever been out there, you'll know 8-9 trucks a day will pass you in about 3 minutes or 4 minutes. So it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. But we would love a pipeline to be there on day one, don't get me wrong. But the economics have to stack up for those who are building it, or the government will have to give subsidies, or whatever the case may be. There has been a fuel study done. There's a lot more work being done, so it could open with a fuel pipeline. We would certainly encourage it, but it's not in our budget, for example.
You just don't say trucking fuel too many times. Could get awkward.
That's why I had orange juice.
We'll go for one last question, and then I think we're done. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. So there are various committees in operation that are looking at this. So there's a Digitisation Technology Committee, which is state government, federal government, WSA, Telstra, Optus, and I think TPG. So they're looking at what they can do to get 5G into the region by the time we open, because we will be a 5G airport. So we open 5G. And that's great, but if we're planning for autonomous vehicles won't run on a 4G network. So you've got to have 5G outside as well. So there's that. There is a committee with Sydney Water and some other water providers as well as to how we handle water. Same with roads. With the rail at Sydney Metro, there's a big working group on the Metro, which is Commonwealth, us, and Transport for New South Wales. So the real challenge here is to get all of that very different sort of infrastructure coming together at the same time, at the same place, in the right way that we can tap into it and the Aerotropolis can tap into it. The Aerotropolis actually has a bigger issue because it's planning to open ahead of us. So it needs water, it needs power. So the power out there is probably going to be insufficient for everybody's needs. So there's got to be a step up there. So Transgrid, Endeavour Energy, these sorts of companies have to significantly increase the supply. We have to plan for redundancy with that sort of thing as well. We're planning to have as much energy from renewable sources and using waste to energy as we possibly can, and to use the grid as the backup, if that's possible. But the demand will, even when we try to minimise the usage of energy, we'll still have a relatively high demand, even though, if not on opening, then shortly thereafter, because we're using high degree of automation in what we do, and aircraft are increasingly becoming energy hungry, if I can put it that way. So when on the ground, one of the things with aircraft, you'll hear a thing called an APU running, an auxiliary power unit, which is a small jet engine in the tail. And what that does is it supplies the aircraft with power for air conditioning, for lighting and what have you. All very good, except they're incredibly polluting. They're awful things. Right? So the plan is no APUs are going to run. They'll still be built into the aircraft, but they'll run. And what they'll do is they'll plug in to the power the bridge supplies. But we've got to supply that bridge. If we get electric aircraft, short-haul electric aircraft, they take a massive amount of energy because they're going to have to recharge their batteries. So more power has to go through the bridge. So we're planning for that as well. Not that that'll be an issue in 2026, but probably come about 2040, Boeing and Airbus are telling us, and Bombardier are telling us that they will have short-haul aircraft that are electrically powered. And they will expect to pull up to the gate, plug in, just like you will with your autonomous vehicle, plug in and recharge pretty quickly. So we need fast charge, means a lot of power. So what we learned only a few weeks ago was that one bridge that's so equipped requires half the energy capacity of the entire terminal building.
Amazing.
Think about that. And we opened with 26 narrow-body equivalent bridges. 26.
Sounds like someone needs to invent solar panels for wings. Maybe. Anyway, we've got some intel on you because you've been with MGSM for around 20 years. We've been told you like French. So on behalf of MGSM AA, we'd like to thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Round of applause. Thank you. So thanks everyone for attending tonight. We'd also like to thank Macquarie University and the Macquarie Business School for making this wonderful facility available for tonight's event. We would particularly like to thank Ramya Acharya, who helped promote our event and provided the photographer and of course, putting all the gel together for tonight. So thanks a lot. So all the photographs will be available through the photo gallery session or section of MGSM AA's website. We encourage you to take a look. So enjoy. And join. And join. There you go. And join. So we obviously have a little bit of intent tonight. If you haven't already joined MGSM AA, we would strongly encourage you to do so. We're actually looking to increase our foundation membership. So we're looking for around 500 foundation members. We're getting closer to that number. You obviously will be part of a great community. You'll be investing your time, your money, your expertise. What do you do as a foundation member? Well, you shape and influence the development of this great alumni association. You'll be reconnecting with peers. You'll be building your legacy in a dynamic new alumni community. And of course, you can speak to Karen tonight if you'd like to know more. We can even sign you up on the spot if you'd like. Yeah, come on up. Come on up.
So John gave me a very clear action, which I got carried away and forgot to do. I did actually want to also introduce all the other board members from the alumni. So can they all please stand up? So Pat McDonald, many of you will know Pat. Rebecca, who is part of our As We See Global chapter. Randall, who many of you also know is a lecturer and very active alumni advocate. Alan McDonald and Lindsay, who's standing there with our card gatherer. So these are all the people who've really tried to mobilise this alumni association working in partnership with Macquarie Business School. And absolutely go to any of these people and get them to get your name and number, and we'd love to sign you up as part of our foundation membership. So thank you. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Karen. All right, I think we're doing a little bit of a lucky door prize now. We've got a few bottles of wine to give away for 3 lucky recipients. Do you want to do the honours, Graham?
Sure, that's good.
If you haven't put your card in, now's the time.
Any others?
Jump them up.
We haven't got a drum roll.
Last one in, first one out.
Okay. I'm on camera, so I'm not able to look anyway. I'll shuffle them.
It's not rude.
Okay, so I've got one. Who wants to read it? You want to read it? You want to read it?
I can read it.
No, not this one. Rob, step on up. Rob Lafreniere, who was in my cohort when I was doing radio.
There you go. I'll take that $20 now.
There's 2 more to go.
There's 2 more to go. Okay.
Is there 2 more to go?
There's 2 more? 2 more to go. 2 more to go. Okay. Let's see what we've got. Step on up. Rob Frank Alafacci. Frank, where are you? Frank.
Congratulations, Frank. Thank you so much. Pleasure. If Sydney Airport win this, I'll never let it down. You got your card in? You got your card in? Is your card in? It is. Okay, here we go. Now, if I pull it out, then I'll do it. Here we go. Okay, I've got one. This is Sharon Yang. Sharon, where are you? Sharon? There's Sharon.
I really have to say that it's amazing and especially with group.
All right. Well done. For Sydney Airport.
Yes, for your project.
Oh, for my project.
Yes.
No.
Not to this.
No. Well, thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Well done.
All right. So, look, I've also got to thank Blue Jeans too. They've provided our recording and web streaming service tonight. Blue Jeans are the world leader in cloud video conferencing. We'd particularly like to thank one of our members, David Thomas, who has been the liaison between Blue Jeans and Macquarie Business School. So I'm not going to hold you back. We'll adjourn now for a networking drinks and canapes. And of course, that's a big part of what we're trying to achieve here with this association is for us to get, it's not just about giving out business cards and having a stack of them in your drawer and you forget about them. We want to try and create a culture that's a little bit deeper than that. So it's about creating some really meaningful relationships tonight. Maybe get out of your comfort zone, meet at one or two strangers, go and have a coffee with them afterwards, and let's really build a strong cohort as a group. So with that, thanks very much, and we'll see you around the corner. Cheers.
Pleasure. Happy to. I don't expect quite as big a group. So.
All the capacities, alumni, one of the favourite lecturers.
Oh, good.
You're going to feel like
I have to say,